I loved comic books. So I thought, is there a way for me to take writing and write comics? These books who help me escape all the problems I've ever had in my life and put me into this new realm of reality. I wanted to provide that for someone else. Hi, I'm Dan Emerson. I am a comic book author, screenwriter, and playwright. I'll be speaking to you about how I got into comic book writing and what that entails. I think I have a pretty unique backstory about how I found my passion in writing. I became sick 7 years ago at the age of 28, and in just 2 weeks after my honeymoon. The next 3 years were spent in and out of hospitals trying to figure out, well, what was wrong with me. My wife was concerned over my mental state due to having to stop working and being placed on disability due to this heart condition. She encouraged me to get back into the world and plan for a future with my new limitations. After she brought up me going back to school over and over and over again, I figured it was a perfect time to listen to her because, well, she's right most of the time. I figured, hey, I might find my new path there. I enrolled at UW-Sauk County, Baraboo, and I really started to enjoy it. But I was truly scared of anything that dealt with writing or English. English was the reason I didn't want to go back to school. It had always been a struggle for me. Well, I soon found out that if I wanted to graduate, I had better get over that fear. And I had to sign up for English 101 with Professor Kelly Dwyer. Every paper I turned in scared me. I always feared that it would be the reason I would have to drop out. But instead of tearing me down, she built me up. She took the little parts of me that were good and she ran with it. Yeah, I know I could not spell words like does. I know now it's not spelled D-O-S-E, and my grammar was far for what was comparable to a college student. She introduced me to Claire Ranke, the English and writing tutor at UW-Baraboo, and Claire spent tons of time working with me, trying to help me understand, not just doing it for me, and challenging me to become a better writer. The following year, Kelly had talked me into taking creative writing, and I thought, you're nuts for taking an English class that's supposed to be fun. In my mind, English was still the furthest thing from fun. On top of it, I had to take English 102 with Dr. Sillas during that same semester. So yes, the guy who was scared to write was taking 2 English classes, and one I did not have to. But Dr. Sillas engaged me in a way that I'm not sure any professor has ever done for me. I felt like I needed to stand at my desk and say, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." Being in his class was somehow fun and made me forget that it was a writing class. Creative writing, on the other hand, started out with poetry. And let me tell you, I almost ran away from that as quick as I signed up. But that year, I wrote 2 important things. One was a play called Respite. It's a short 10-minute play, which was accepted to the Play On Festival just outside of Chicago. It was my first true success at writing. And it made me produce playwright. Secondly, was a short story I called Are Aliens Real?, which would later become my first comic book series. With the play being picked up, I felt like I was on top of the world, even though I was sure I was going to study geology and not writing. That spring, I took a class called Literary Magazine, again at UW-Baraboo, where the students put together the Spirit Lake Review every year. I volunteered to try and learn all the computer work and exactly how to format a publication. I learned that because I was a student, I had free access to a program called Publisher. It's part of that Microsoft suite. And I learned that this program was key to so many things in my future. So all of these classes were just stacking up and putting me in the right place at the right time in the right direction. The following year, I decided to take creative writing too. At this point, I decided, hey, this writing thing's kind of cool. I befriended a guy named John Markstead, a former author, a fellow author, not a former, who I now consider one of my best friends. He showed me that it's never too late to take writing seriously. So I thought about it over and over. But I knew I didn't want to become a novelist. I'm not one of those guys who can sit down and put 120,000 words into a book. And, well, at least I wasn't at that time. I might be now. But I loved comic books. So I thought, is there a way for me to take writing and write comics? These books who help me escape all the problems I've ever had in my life and put me into this new realm of reality. I wanted to provide that for someone else. So this was a question I seriously had to ask myself. I was able to connect myself with publishers and writers. There was some luck, some might even call it fate, and a lot of networking done to make this dream a reality. It just so happens my mother-in-law gave me a gift the year before that was 2 drawings by a gentleman of the name of Jim Salicrup. He's a former editor-in-chief of Marvel. He now works for Paper Cuts out of New York, was one of Stan Lee's best friends. Not only did she give me those, she helped arrange a visit with him at Wizard World Chicago that same year. After one of his panels, I got to go talk to him. Got him to sign one of my favorite comic books that he was an editor on. And I got to ask him anything I wanted to. Every story about Venom and the Marvel characters he created, Stan Lee, all these things that every geek inside wanted to know. And he sat there and he answered every question for me. And it just made my passion grow and grow and grow. But here I am speaking to this living legend. And a question comes out of me that I did not even expect. How do I get into writing comics? His answer was the shortest but best answer anyone could have ever given me. He looked me in the face and he said, just do it. In my head, I thought this guy just gave me the Nike line and I was confused. How could I just do it? There has to be more to this, right? He could see the confusion on my face, and he told me the only thing he could tell me was to just do it. There are plenty of ways to do it, but part of the journey is figuring it out. So I walked away from this conversation with this living legend that had just told me, just do it. So I did. I got home and I told my wife what I was thinking. Even though she supports me fully in all my ventures, I could see the look in her eyes. She thought, you're crazy. I had no idea how to make a comic. I could not draw. My editing was horrible. And yet, here I was, a guy at home who thinks he's going to make a comic and compete with the big two, Marvel and DC, on top of it all. I spent hundreds of hours watching YouTube and scouring looking for artists. I found out quickly that, well, artists are expensive. $100 to $250 a page. No problem. Well, there's no way I'm talking my wife into dropping $2,000 to $5,000 to draw a comic I am quite unsure of. So luckily, being the giant nerd that I am, I follow comic artists by the name of Todd McFarlane on Facebook. And I sent him the most ridiculous message asking if he knew of any artists looking to start up. I placed this message to him in his comments after one of his videos. And to my surprise, he responded. While advising he did not know any artists off the top of his head, he knew a lot of people were always looking. He admitted, well, he was one of them at one time, and to just keep looking. Well, as it turns out, I didn't have to look very far because that same day, an artist from Greece contacted me because of this message I had posted in his videos. Sillas is the artist's name, Sillas Sargul, and he said he was looking to break into the industry and would work for supplies if I was serious. Being that he's from Greece, he needed help breaking into the comic world and thought that we could help each other out. My writing and his art skills and my drive. I think this guy could sense my passion as I was begging one of the world's most famous artists to help me find, an artist. The next week I talked to my buddy John and I says, this is what's going on. I have an artist. I really think I'm going to do this. He looked me in the face and said, yeah, go for it. I'll even edit it. And just like that, I had a team. So while I was learning about making comics on YouTube, and Sillas started doing some concept art off the story I sent him, I was fine-tuning my work in Publisher. And I guess it's time to get doing this and follow the best advice I was ever given. Just do it. John and I made a layout at a coffee shop here in town. We sat down with our computers, and even though we had no idea what we were doing, it seemed to work out fine. We broke down the story I had wrote in creative writing, section by section, saying, hey, this is important, this isn't important, this is what we want, creating new outlines, and we put them in the panels. And panels in comic book world are the little cells that you're going to see in a book that are each individual block. And just a little comic speak, so when I'm talking, you guys know what I'm talking about. We spent around 2 months getting that done, and we got it to Sillas. He spent a good 2 to 3 months drawing up the book. When I got all the art back, I looked at it and I thought, well, that's not how a comic book looks. It's very unpolished. It was very shaky. It's sketch work. I knew I had missed something. So back to YouTube I went. I found out that I had to take his art and I had to enhance every page, digitally inking them since, of course, I couldn't afford an inker for my comic. It was a hands-on learning experience on the fly for sure. So here, what I want to do is I want to show you guys some examples of what that looks like. And here, you guys are going to see this is one of the original pages that I was given, and this was the first concept art for the cover. Very few people have seen this. It's done rough marker. And you're going to see that it's very sketchy. It's gray. It's not dark. It's not high contrast. It's not got that silky smoothness to it. This is what the cover ended up looking like after we digitally ink it. So everything becomes this pitch black lines, and the darkness is totally included in it. And we have to lay everything on top of his image. So to give you an idea how the pages look, though, this is his sketch. Things are angled, not straight. There's no division really between the panels, things like that. So what I have to do is I have to figure out, how am I going to do this? This is one where I put text in it, but this is an example of putting borders on everything. So then you have to take and you have to do this all by hand, each individual one of these lines, and you have to fill each individual section. And if your lines are not complete and you go to fill, it's going to fill everything else you don't want it to. So it's very meticulous and very time consuming, but very well worth it. This is another example here. This is a page, and he wanted to do it with no bars, but in the comic world, people like division to show it. So I put the division in it, and you guys will see here that the hair is very gray, that the lines are not crisp. Down here, this is all supposed to be a silhouette of a body, and I needed that to really show. So I had to go in and digitally fix the entire page, spending countless hours to bring it to this set. And I had no idea how much work that it actually took to make a comic book. When I had the art finished, I needed to turn it into an actual book at this point. I needed to put words in the book. Well, in comics, there are people who get paid to do this, and they're called letterers. As you saw from my images, I had letters, but I had to do that. But at this point, I was a startup. I did not have the funds to pay somebody to do this for me. So like many times before, I went to YouTube and I found videos on digitally lettering your book. Once this was done, I got to take a deep breath. Wow. I legitimately have a comic that I created. I found an artist, I have an editor, and we have it on the computer. That is great, right? Well, I have a computer file of comic, and I have no idea what to do with it at this point. Do I send it to a publication house? Do I release it digitally? So at this point, I thought, hey, you know what? I completed the book. I did what Jim asked me. I went out and I just did it. So I reached out to him again. And he introduced me to a guy named Enric Hoffman. This is a name that all comic book creators should get to know, because this guy is a true inspiration and a true friend of mine. This is a guy who has sold over 100,000 indie books on his own at Comic Cons, hand by hand sales, and knows how to conquer the industry. He showed me his book Yishu Shin and started to explain how Jim had helped him into the industry. And Jim, when he helped him, told him he's got to pay it forward. If he's going to spend time and teach him how to do this, he's got to pay it forward. And if Jim had sent me to him, he knew, hey, I got to help this guy out. Coming to find out, it wasn't a mandatory thing. This guy truly enjoys helping people out. So he told me about Comic Cons where he sold his books and how he did it all himself. He walked me through finding printers and what I needed to do to get in these shows, which is crazy complex. Tons of forms and money, and these shows are not cheap. They're $300 to $450 per show. So I take his advice and I'm like, okay. I head over to the printers and I quickly realize printing is expensive and it is beyond complicated. All this putting together the comic book was so easy compared to figuring out how to do printing. I had learned about formatting for printing, which let me tell you is just, it's insane. I understand why people get paid more for this than any other part of assembling a book. I had learned about gutter margins, bleeds, trims, and that, well, each page in a comic is different in size because the book itself grows. So when you fold it, the page on the outside is bigger than the page on the inside because it's got to wrap around. I had never thought about this. Some simple concept you would think, but no. And it makes every page a different size. Still, I had to get through this. And luckily, my father-in-law is in the printing business, and I was able to sit down with him, and he answered all my questions and helped me walk through this. So yet again, lucky just by knowing people. Still, at this point, printing copies of my book is expensive. And as you guys have heard me say, I'm a startup. I'm unsure of how far this is going to go. I'm nervous about spending money. But what am I going to do? I've got to suck it up. If you're going to make it, you have to print. It's so critical to comics. So I took a chance and I printed just 250 of my comic, Are Aliens Real? A short story that my comic, that I turned into my comic book renamed Embodiment. When I had physical copies in my hand, Henri says, hey, you know what? I want to meet you. He invited me out to join him at C2E2 with John. Now, C2E2 is in Chicago, and it's the Comic and Entertainment Expo show that will have around 75,000 attendees. So the first Comic-Con I ever went to sell was a Comic-Con with 75,000 attendees. At the show, he showed me the ropes on selling and marketing my books to every person that walked by with one simple line. Can I tell you about my book? In just under 2 hours, I had sold 70 books, and I felt like I was king of the world. Luckily for me, Jim Solid Group was at this show, and I was able to give him a book and thank him. But I had to know at this point why he gave me that advice. When I asked him why that was his advice, he explained that a lot of people ask him how to get in the industry. It's one of the most common questions he gets asked. And that unless they just do it, they never will accomplish it. And all of a sudden, this made sense to me. This is a guy who's had some of the most success in the industry. And he knows that unless you literally put the pen on the paper, you're going to get nowhere. So I was able to take this great picture with Henri and Jim with my new book that was signed to Jim. And I knew from that moment I'd be doing this for a long time to come. Book one took off like a rocket, needing to get a second printing soon after that show. And now I had the money to pay for it. I sold all these books. I thought about what Henri had said. He told me, pay it forward. So for book one, second printing, I wanted a different comic cover artist. The Sillas does all the art for the first printings, but I want to bring somebody new in. By new, I mean an artist that's never been printed as a cover artist to help them get exposure, which seems to help them and myself for a second printing and all the special different edition covers and books I printed since then. The following year, we released book two and hit the Comic-Con circuit. My buddy John, an author in his own right, penning the Humanity Resurgence series, and I shared a table. Just decided it was now or never. We made our own signage yet again, and I watched YouTube learning all I could. What do we need to set up our table? What is the etiquette for Comic Cons? And I found out that these aren't exactly things that you can learn from YouTube. There's a lot of things you can learn from YouTube, and I think you can learn almost everything. But this is one of those hands-on events. Um, so just to start out here, this is a picture of myself and Enric Hoffman and Jim Salicrup. Still to this day, my favorite accomplishment in the comic book world is handing that book to him and him being like, "This is impressive to see that you just did it." Copies of the books being sold. So this is a picture I want to stop you guys at here. When we're looking at the Comic Cons, you have such limited space. This is all we have. The three people back here are in a tight, confined space, and we're trying to sell to 75,000 people. And you have just a small table, but you've got to make yourself stand out. You got to bring the signage and the uniqueness to your booth to really draw people in. And this here's Trevor. This is the Chicago Wizard World exclusive artist. I had him come in and do a signing that day. I'll explain this picture in a second, but this one here shows you more of a table space that you have. Surprisingly, this is not enough space for two grown men to sell behind one of these tables. And this table will cost you $400 to $500 to set up there for 3 days. So you're taking a chance just to get it. And don't worry about getting these fancy banners or high stands. As you see here, John and I have these cheap metal signs that we are able to customize and make it ourselves. And we got a cheap banner stand. You don't need the best of the best to get started. You just need to get started. As Jim said it, just do it. You got to just throw your stuff out there. And the most important thing are those books on that table. So we've got this set up. We got this understanding at this point. And we're like, okay, we've got our tables. Let's go. And off we went to Wisconsin Comic-Con in Milwaukee, a 3-day comic convention that bombed. Our first show, and it bombed bad. The attendance for that show was under 10% of the expected total that was supposed to be at that show. But somehow we broke even, and we fought hard to do that. Thankfully, we knew that each show was going to be hard, so we just had to keep fighting to make some sales here and there. But the real thing was making the friends and the contacts that we did at these shows. In this industry, you're going to learn that this book selling is a great thing for you. Getting it into people's hands that make a difference and making friends and contacts, that's just as important as the money you can make at these conventions. They help you connect with the people who can get you in the right spots at the right time, or get your product to a person looking for it, or a person that can push that product to the next level, a film, a TV. That's the goal that you're always going for. The industry of comics really revolves around treating people the way you want to be treated. We had a lot more success with our other shows in 2019. In 2021, we plan on hitting the ground running, as in 2020, we're kind of dead in the water. They're canceling every Comic-Con due to Corona, so I'd rather stay healthy and safe at home. But next year, we will take over the world. We're going to be traveling the country and really trying to make a name for ourselves. The book, Embodiment Book 3, came out 2 weeks ago, and we'll be releasing book 4 and 5 by next year along the way. A new book called A Room for Six, which is that image I wanted to explain to you guys before, is a completely different artist and story. This will be a 3-book series coming out early next year, but this is going to be very important for you to understand what I was talking about with contacts. So at Wisconsin Comic-Con, at the table next to me was an artist by the name of Mike Seuss. And Mike Seuss was sitting there and he was just sketching and he was working when we were slow. And I was like, man, your art is amazing. This is beautiful. This is what I'd love to see in my books. And he says, oh, I've never had anybody say that they'd like me to draw for them. I just like doing this for fun. I said, well, it's really impressive stuff. And this guy is amazing. So we became friends and just, getting to know the guy. And now over the last year, we've talked. He's read my story called A Room for Six. And he's like, let's do this. Let's take a chance and try to make each other become someone. So we wrote the book out, and now it's in his hands, and he's doing the original concept art for it right now. So that's just a little clue as to what's going on in my world. But some of the things that I think are really important to take away here is that you could really learn to do anything you want on YouTube. It's an amazing world out there. That this entire book was built in my house, as we call it, Mom's most famous basement comic book. The old comic books used to draw. It's a basement dwelling comic book, but we learned how to do it off of YouTube, and you can do the same thing. Secondly, as Jim Salicrup best put it, just do it. If you never try, you can never fail. That's true. But if you never try, you can never succeed either. Thanks for teaching me that, Jim. Don't be afraid to ask for help. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me through my email. I'm more than happy to answer them. I could sit here all day and talk about the technical aspect of things, but I don't think it's going to do you any good until you have something in front of you that you're working on. I think it's so important to be working on things and learning them as you go. It's the most critical thing for me was saying, oh no, I got a problem. My file deleted. This is corrupt. How am I going to fit this to print? How am I going to do this? It wasn't having those questions before I was at that moment. It was that moment that taught me to do it the proper way, because I was stressed out. I was freaking out. And I said, I got to do this right. There's just no other option. Pay it forward. The industry has tons of people who are scared and unsure on how to do something. Once someone helps you figure out how to do it, help someone else. The only way the indie publications world is ever going to grow is if we do it together. These little Zoom meetings that the library is putting on are critical to helping this publication world. There's these giant publishers who are going to pick one out of 10 million people that are going to pick up and say, hey, come write for us. And that's fine and dandy. But there's us that are 1 out of 10,000 that are saying, hey, we can do it on our own with the support of our community, the support of our friends. That's the important thing. Make sure you pay it forward. Make sure you're always trying to help someone. You also want to find people who want to work in the industry and are looking for a way in. I never wrote comics. I never assembled comics. I never printed comics. I never digitally edited the art in comics. John had never edited comics, and Sillas had never drawn in comics. Yet here I am in my hand, a comic book that all of us created that we had never done before, because we followed what Jim said and just did it. And we had the passion. We found each other's strengths and we worked hard together. That is very critical. Lastly, I want to say thank your friends and family as much as you can. They'll be your first customers and your most loyal fan base. They are the people who are going to support you no matter how bad your product is or how great it is. They're going to love it no matter what. Sometimes it's a curse. Sometimes you feel better about it than what you should. But at the end, you know that you're loved and supported. And make sure you tell them that you know that. It was so important for me to find that out. And I've made special things just for people who have helped me and who bought 3 of my books at the beginning and said, because this is going to be something, we believe in you. They bought 3 of my books just because they said they wanted to collect them. Those are the people who are going to make the biggest difference in your life and make the biggest difference in you becoming a writer. So you can find any of my books for sale at something-from-nothing.com. Sorry for the hyphens. It's a lot cheaper website, where you can take advantage of a special until the end of this month. So what I'm doing for you guys is if you go there and you pick up my 3-book bundle, it's all 3 of my digital books. I will give you 50% off that bundle, and that's right, you can get those for just $5. If you use the code BOO50 at checkout, that's BOO50 at checkout, you will get all 3 books for $5. And of course, I would ask you guys to rate a lovely review or send me a message saying, hey, we love it. I love those reviews. It's the hardest thing for me to get in the industry. Any author you ever read, please send them a review. They could use it. So I'd like to thank you all for your time. I'd like to wish you all to stay safe and healthy. And please keep up on updates with me. You can get those updates on my website. Again, something-from-nothing.com. Or you can follow me on Instagram at somethingfromnothingsfn. All right, guys. Thank you very much.